The evening at Clarence House started like any other royal gathering, polished silverware reflecting the chandelier light and laughter bouncing off the grand walls, but beneath the surface, tension simmered, invisible to the casual observer. George, the youngest of William and Kate's children, was gleefully chasing his siblings around the dining hall, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond his innocent eyes. Kate watched him, her heart full but wary. Something in the air felt different tonight. William, seated beside her, exchanged light conversation with Charles, but his mind kept drifting back to the subtle interactions earlier that day, the fleeting glances and faint smirks that suggested more than ordinary familial affection. Camilla, poised at the head of the table, radiated charm on the surface, her smile immaculate, but those who had studied her closely knew the careful calculations behind it. She sipped her tea delicately, eyes flicking toward George with a peculiar intensity that sent shivers down William's spine, though he pretended not to notice. The servants moved efficiently around the room, bringing in courses and clearing plates with silent precision, unaware that tonight's protocol would not be enough to prevent disaster. Dinner commenced, warm light casting shadows on the polished floors. George eagerly dug into his soup, humming with delight as Camilla offered gentle encouragement. "Eat well, my dear," she murmured, a tone that seemed almost nurturing, but William felt the edge hidden beneath her words. Kate's hand brushed his under the table, a silent plea for him to stay calm. The air carried a subtle tension, a contrast between the innocent laughter of children and the undercurrent of calculated strategy from Camilla. As George continued eating, a creeping unease began to settle over William. Something was off. The kitchen staff had been vetted countless times, every ingredient double-checked, especially for George's shrimp allergy. Yet, a small vial, unnoticed by anyone, had made its way into the soup, a detail no one outside the walls of the palace would have predicted. Time was a silent predator. George finished his meal, playful and unaware, but the initial calm was deceptive. Later, as the night deepened, George lay in his room building Lego towers, a sanctuary of normalcy amidst the chaos outside. Kate kissed him goodnight, whispering words of comfort as she left for a late charity engagement, leaving William behind for a meeting with advisors. The babysitter, who was meant to remain, had vanished, called away under a pretense that Camila orchestrated. Alone, George's body began to react slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. A tickle in the throat, a faint itch along his arms, small signals of a danger lurking in plain sight. Panic erupted when the reaction escalated rapidly. Lips swollen, skin flushing crimson, George struggled to breathe. The room, silent moments ago, became a scene of terrifying urgency. Kate, racing back in her car, could hardly see through the tears as sirens wailed, her heart lurching with every second. William, summoned immediately, felt a cold dread. The protocols, the checks, the loyal staff, all meant to keep George safe, had failed. Or had someone deliberately sabotaged them? At the hospital, chaos swirled around George, doctors rushing to administer epinephrine, nurses coordinating with practiced precision, and yet Kate's fear was unshakable. He held her child, whispering reassurances as William arrived, his jaw tight with suspicion. This was no accident. His mind raced through possible culprits, his gaze involuntarily flicking to the shadow of Camila looming over past interactions. Who else had motive, knowledge, and the cunning to orchestrate such a calculated risk? The answer seemed increasingly clear, and William's resolve hardened. Tonight wasn't just about survival, it was about uncovering the truth, no matter how deep the shadows ran within their own family. Outside in the dim corridors of Clarence House, Camilla sipped her tea, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. She knew the chaos she had set in motion, calculated precisely to strike fear and sow distrust, yet stopping short of tragedy. A game of patience and control, a dangerous dance that only she fully understood, had begun, and the pieces were moving exactly as she intended. William would be forced to respond, but Camilla was already thinking 3 moves ahead, and the night was far from over. William William didn't sleep that night. The images of George struggling for air replayed endlessly in his mind, each memory sharpening his resolve. By morning, he had already contacted a trusted MI5 friend, discreetly sharing the evidence he'd gathered. The recordings, the emails, the suspicious transfers to Tomas, every detail pointed in one direction, yet it still needed airtight confirmation. The royal palace was a maze of politics, loyalty, and hidden agendas, and William knew he couldn't make a misstep. Kate stayed close to George, making sure he ate slowly and calmly, her hands never leaving his small ones. Every laugh, every shy smile was a reminder of how fragile this balance was. She glanced at her husband when he returned from his early morning investigation, seeing the dark circles under his eyes. "William, you're pushing yourself too hard," she whispered, but he only shook his head. There was no room for rest, not until Camila's intentions were fully exposed. William arranged a private security briefing. Thomas had no reason to act alone, he said firmly, laying out the evidence. Someone gave him the orders, someone with access, influence, and the audacity to risk a child's life. The team nodded, exchanging uneasy glances. The palace had its secrets, and now one of the most dangerous was playing out in real time. Cameras, transaction logs, and encrypted messages were being examined by the top security analysts. Every lead, every anomaly was scrutinized under William's careful eye. Meanwhile, Camilla was already moving her pieces for the next phase. From her private estate on the outskirts of London, she monitored every news outlet, every social media post. She smiled faintly as the press frenzy continued. Public opinion was a weapon, and she wielded it with precision. William was being questioned in the court of public perception before the truth could even surface. Every headline, every article framed him as reckless, as a father who could not protect his own son. But Camilla had miscalculated one thing: William's determination. Kay sensed a shift in the hospital corridors. Nurses whispered about unusual requests from the kitchen staff, small changes in meal preparation, inconsistencies in ingredient checks. She jotted notes discreetly, realizing that George's near-fatal encounter wasn't just an isolated incident. Someone had used their knowledge of the palace's routines to manipulate outcomes. The realization made her stomach turn, but she kept a calm exterior. George needed normalcy, not fear. By late afternoon, William had traced the overseas server that had sent the forged emails. Each click, each line of code led back to a series of shell companies and intermediaries, ultimately linking to Camilla's inner circle. The evidence was becoming undeniable. He reviewed the recordings again, the subtle inflections in Camilla's voice a sinister confirmation of the truth. Her calculated coldness, her manipulative charm, it was all there. He felt the familiar fire ignite inside him, a mix of anger, disbelief, and resolve. That evening, William prepared to confront her. He reviewed every piece of evidence, rehearsing how he would present it. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. Public perception, family loyalty, and the safety of his children all hinged on this confrontation. As he approached Clarence's house, the setting sun cast long shadows across the grounds, mirroring the tension that gripped him. Camilla was waiting, poised and composed, unaware that William had pieced together the entire sequence of her machinations. The first words were sharp, measured. "Camilla, we need to talk." Her polite smile faltered slightly, a flicker of uncertainty passing over her features. William held up the USB, his eyes unblinking. "This," he said, voice low but firm, "contains evidence that points directly to you and your accomplices. Attempted poisoning, forgery, manipulation of the press. It ends tonight." The air in the room thickened, a palpable tension pressing against the walls. Charles observed silently, caught between disbelief and the weight of the undeniable facts presented before him. Camilla's reaction was a mixture of feigned innocence and simmering panic. She adjusted her posture, eyes darting, calculating. "This is absurd," she murmured, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. William's jaw tightened. "Absurd?" The emails, the transfers, the recordings, every detail leads back to you. Your games have endangered my son. Do you understand that? Camilla's composure cracked for the first time, her mind racing for a way out, yet every option seemed to narrow. William had cornered her, and for the first time, the power she wielded so effortlessly seemed fragile. The room fell silent, the tension stretching until it could almost be felt in every heartbeat. Allies and advisors waited, watching as a battle of truth manipulation and familial loyalty tragedy unfolded in the quiet grandeur of Clarence House. The first moves had been made, and the consequences were about to ripple through every corner of the royal household. Camilla's eyes narrowed, a mixture of fear and defiance sparking behind her carefully constructed facade. She had underestimated Willem's persistence, and now the walls she had built around her schemes were crumbling. The USB lay on the table between them, a silent testament to every calculated move she had made. Thomas's confessions, the money trails, the manipulated recordings. They left no room for plausible deniability. Willem's gaze never wavered, steady and unflinching, as if the truth itself had taken a tangible form in front of him. Charles, seated at the head of the table, finally spoke, voice wavering with authority and disappointment. "Camilla, these actions are unacceptable. If Willem is correct, the safety of his children was compromised. How could you justify this?" Camilla's hands tightened around the armrests of her chair. She opened her mouth, trying to summon a defense, but the weight of the evidence left her faltering. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the chandelier above. Advisors glanced at each other, the tension palpable. Every whisper, every glance carried the unspoken acknowledgement the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Willem stepped closer, leaning over the table, voice low but cutting. "You targeted my son, you manipulated staff, orchestrated lies in the media, and tried to undermine everything Kate and I stand for. This isn't just family drama, this is criminal." Camilla's lips pressed into a thin line, her mind racing. The usual confidence, the poised elegance she carried into every public room, had abandoned her. Even her allies, those who had subtly reinforced her influence, looked on uncertainly. Her plan had unraveled with a speed she had never anticipated. Kate, standing beside George, who clung to her hand, watched with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. George's eyes, wide but calmer now, followed every movement, sensing the gravity of the confrontation. His small hand squeezed Kate's, silently affirming that he trusted her to protect him. Kate met Willem's eyes, a brief nod exchanged between them, an unspoken promise that they would face the storm together. The room had become a crucible, forging a rare moment of unity between father, mother, and child against the chaos that had sought to engulf them. Camilla's voice finally broke the silence, trembling as she attempted a final plea. "You misunderstand everything. My intention was to protect the family," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. Willem's glare sharpened, every word he spoke slicing through her weak pretense. "Protect the family by nearly killing your grandson? Protect by smearing my name to the press? Protect by creating fear and chaos? Stop lying to yourself and everyone here." His words carried the weight of authority, anger, and undeniable truth. The advisors exchanged glances, some leaning forward, others shaking their heads in disbelief at the depth of manipulation revealed. The evidence was overwhelming. Thomas, though absent from the room, had left a trail too clear to ignore. Every transaction, every instruction he had received tied directly to Camilla's inner circle. Willem presented each detail with calm precision, his voice steady as he recounted the series of events, leaving no room for ambiguity. Camilla's attempts to regain control faltered with each revelation, the walls of her carefully constructed deception collapsing around her. Finally, Charles's voice rang out, firm and resolute. "Camilla, for the safety of the children, for the integrity of this family, for the crown itself, these actions cannot be ignored. Consequences will follow." Camilla slumped back, a bitter laugh escaping her lips, knowing that the game she had thought she controlled had slipped entirely from her grasp. Willem's stance softened slightly as he turned to Kate and George, relief mingling with the lingering tension. George, still fragile but safe, looked at his father, a quiet trust shining in his eyes. The room exhaled collectively, a tension that had gripped the palace for days finally releasing. Camilla, stripped of influence and power, was left to face the aftermath of her choices. Willem, Kate, and George, though shaken, had emerged intact, their unity strengthened by the trials endured. Outside, the world buzzed with news and speculation, but within these walls, one truth stood resolute. The family had survived, and the shadows that once threatened them had been confronted head-on. As George smiled shyly, Kate squeezed his hand, whispering, "We're safe now, love." Willem's eyes met theirs, a promise unspoken but understood. No one would harm their family without reckoning again.